The wind howled like it had a grudge, slamming snow against the cabin windows until the glass rattled in its frame. I was alone out here on the ridge, the kind of quiet I'd chased for months after the city chewed me up. No neighbors close enough to borrow sugar from, just pines bending under the blizzard's weight. Then the knock came, sharp, insistent, cutting through the storm's roar. My heart thudded. Power had flickered out an hour ago, leaving the place cooling fast, the chills seeping under the door like fingers. I grabbed the lantern, crossed the creaky floor. Who'd be out in this? The knob turned cold in my hand. There she stood. My neighbor, the paramedic from down the road. Drenched, jacket plastered to her like a second skin. Eyes sharp, but shadowed. She didn't wait for an invitation. Mind if I come in? Shift ran long and the roads... Her voice cut off as a gust shoved her forward, snow swirling in behind. I stepped aside, the door thudding shut against the assault. Up close, she looked smaller than I remembered. Boots tracking slush across a threshold, that blue uniform jacket heavy with meltwater. I'd seen her around town, always professional, always with some guy on her arm at the diner. Straight as the highway, or so the gossip went. No ring, but stories of exes, barbecues, the small town script. I nodded toward the fire. Get warm. I'll make tea. My hands moved on autopilot, kettle to the stove, while she peeled off her gloves, fingers red and stiff. The cabin smelled of pine smoke and wet wool now. She hovered by the hearth, rubbing her arms, gaze flicking over the space, my books stacked uneven, the quilt draped on the chair. Thanks, she said, voice steady, like she was triaging a call. Blizzard caught me off guard. Last patient was a wreck. Car slid into the ditch. Pulled her out, but the cold, it gets in your bones. I handed her the mug, steam curling up. Our fingers brushed. Just a second. But enough to feel the chill in her skin. She wrapped both hands around it, blowing softly. Exhaustion etched her face, lines around her eyes, shoulders slumped under the weight of whatever she'd seen that night. I'd assumed she was all walls, that paramedic armor keeping the world at bay. Straight life, straight job, no room for mess. But here she was, in my space, the storm trapping us. You live alone out here? She asked, sipping, eyes meeting mine over the rim. Yeah, needed the quiet. I sat across from her, the chair creaking. The fire popped, casting shadows that danced on the logs. Outside, the blizzard raged on, visibility 0, like the world had folded in on itself. She nodded, but her posture said more. Fists tight on the mug, jaw set. Quiet's good after a shift, sometimes too quiet. A pause, her gaze drifting to the window where snow piled high. I wondered about the calls she ran, the lives slipping through gloved hands, the guard she wore like that jacket. Straight or not, something in her cracked just then. A flicker of need beneath the calm. We talked weather first, how the forecast lied, how the ridge always got hit hardest. Her name was Lena, she'd said once at the store, buying bandages and coffee. Ex-boyfriend mentioned slipped and casual, like he hated storms, always. I listened, assuming the lines she drew, the life she led. But her eyes lingered on the fire, distant, like she was replaying a siren wail. The cold pressed in, the cabin's heat fighting back. You should stay till it lets up, I offered. She hesitated, then set the mug down. As the wind howled louder, she stepped closer to the flames, and to me, shedding the last of her wet layers, the professional shell thinning in the glow. The fire snapped and settled, embers glowing like buried secrets in the hearth. Lena shrugged off her jacket fully now, hanging it on the hook by the door, where it dripped steadily onto the worn boards. Underneath, her shirt clung too, outlining the steady lines of her shoulders, the way her arms moved with that practiced efficiency. The cabin wrapped around us, simple walls of knotty pine, shelves lined with jars of preserves from last summer's harvest, a table, scarred from years of solitary meals. I'd built this place as a refuge, walls thick against the wind, windows small, to keep the world at bay. But tonight, with her here, it felt smaller, the air thicker with the scent of damp fabric and wood smoke. She eased into the chair opposite mine, boots kicked off by the rug, socks leaving faint wet prints. "The storm's a beast," she said, rubbing her hands together, the professional edge in her voice softening just a touch, like she was assessing the damage, not just chatting. I nodded, poking at the logs with the iron, sparks lifting lazy into the chimney. The weather talk flowed easy. How the ridge funneled the snow like a chute, how last winter buried the truck for days. Her laugh came low, unexpected, when I mentioned the time a drift blocked the outhouse path. "Sounds like my ex," she said, casual as stacking wood. "Always digging out of his own messes." Tom hated the cold, preferred city heat, bars with neon signs. I fetched the wool blanket from the chest, thick and heavy from the sheep down the valley. "Here," I said, draping it over her lap. She pulled it up, fingers grazing mine in the fold. Accidental, but the touch lingered. Her skin warmer now from the mug, rough from gloves and grips on stretchers. My pulse shifted, a quiet thud under my ribs, like the first crack in frozen earth. She didn't pull away fast, eyes flicking to the fire instead, the flames reflecting in them. The cabin's heat pushed back the chill seeping from the cracks, but sitting there, with her wrapped in my blanket, the space between us warmed different. Subtle, like sun on ridge rock after dawn. We kept at the small talk, her posture loosening, legs stretching toward the hearth, the way she leaned back, letting the chair take her weight. No more clipped tones, just stories of shifts where weather turned calls sideways, ambulances sliding on ice. "You learn to move quick," she said, "but the cold slows everything." I watched her hands, calloused palms flexing, the kind that held lives steady. My own life here felt stark in contrast. Days of chopping wood, tending the garden plot, the quiet that healed city scars but left hollows. Straight life for her, I figured, all those X's painting the picture, no room for the poles I knew too well. But her gaze met mine longer now, the blanket a bridge across the floor. The lantern light wavered as another gust rattled the panes. Outside, snow piled against the sill, white and relentless. She shifted, the blanket slipping a bit, and I reached to steady it. Our knuckles brushing again, this time deliberate enough to notice. Tension coiled low, unspoken, like wire under snow. The fire's warmth spread, but the room held its breath. Then the power flickered, once, twice, before dying out. The cabin plunged darker, the lantern our only steady glow, pulling us closer to the hearth's light. She sat up straighter, but didn't move away. The darkness settled heavy, the lantern's flame the only steady thing, throwing long shadows across the pine walls. We shifted closer to the hearth, the fire's heat a thin barrier against the cold pressing in from every crack. I added a log, the wood hissing as it caught, sparks lifting like fleeting thoughts. Lena pulled the blanket tighter, her knees drawn up now, the space between us shrinking to arm's reach. The quiet after the power died felt alive, full of the storm's muffled roar outside. I broke the silence first, words tumbling out like they'd been waiting. Living out here, it's what I needed after the city. But some nights, the quiet bites back. No one to talk to, just the wind and the ridge staring down. My voice hung there, raw in the glow. I'd come for this isolation, to mend the breaks from too many failed connections, women who faded like morning fog. But admitting the loneliness now, with her here, cracked something open. She nodded slow, eyes on the flames, the firelight catching the edge of her jaw. "Quiet can be a weight," she said, voice low, like she was measuring each word. Her fingers traced the mug's rim, empty now, the steam long gone. I watched her, the way her shoulders stayed squared, that paramedic poise holding firm. But her gaze drifted, distant, like she was back on a call, sirens cutting night, hands steady on a pulse that wasn't. Shifts like tonight, you see too much. A kid in a wreck, parents screaming. You patch, you move on, but it sticks. She rubbed her temple, a small gesture, unguarded for a beat. Vulnerability flickered there, hidden under the calm, like embers under ash. The warmth from the fire spread, seeping into my skin, but sitting this close, her heat reached too, the blanket's edge brushing my leg where it draped over. She shifted, uncurling a bit. her arm resting on the chair's edge, inches from mine. Subtle, the way her body leaned in. Not overt, but enough to stir the air. I caught myself staring at her hands again, strong from IV lines and compressions, now lax in her lap. The straight facade she'd worn, those ex-boyfriend stories, the diner dates, felt thinner here in the fire's honesty. Was it all armor or something deeper buried? I tested the water. Sounds heavy, carrying that alone. You ever let it out with someone who gets it? My pulse thudded steady, like boots on frozen ground. She met my eyes then, direct, but a hesitation pulled at her mouth. Not really. Small town, you know. Keep it professional. But yeah, sometimes I wonder about the what-ifs. Back in training, there was this one instructor. Complicated. Her words trailed, a hint of old pulls surfacing, bisexual shadows she'd boxed away for the easy path. No details, but the way she said it, voice softening, cracked the guard wider. We sat with that, the fire popping between us. Then she chuckled, dry as ridge dust. Storm's got perfect timing, huh? Traps you with your neighbor, just when you need to spill. Her laugh pulled one from me too, light against the dark, easing the tension like sun-breaking clouds. Her foot nudged mine under the blanket, accidental maybe, but she didn't move it. The contact warm, grounding. Night deepened outside, the blizzard's howl fading to a steady drone. The conversation eased toward the personal, her voice dropping lower, the fire our only witness. The fire had burned low, embers pulsing like a slowing heartbeat. Lena's words hung in the dim, her admission about that instructor, fading into the crackle of settling logs. I felt the shift, the air between us thicker now, charged like the moments before thunder rolls down the ridge. She stared into the flames, her profile sharp against the glow, the blanket pooled around her waist. I wanted to ask more, to pull at that thread, but the quiet held us, respectful of whatever walls she'd built. Tell me about tonight's call, I said finally, voice soft, not pushing. The one that got you out late. She exhaled slow, rubbing her palms on her thighs, the motion deliberate, like shaking off frost from a gate latch. Her eyes stayed distant, fixed on some point beyond the hearth, maybe replaying blue lights cutting snow, or the weight of a body too still. Bad one, she started, voice steady as ever, that paramedic clip keeping it clinical. Elderly woman, alone in a trailer off the county road. Slipped on ice, hip shattered. By the time we got there, shock had set in. Cold like this, it steals heat fast. We stabilized, got her out, but her eyes... She trailed off, jaw tightening, the words sticking like mud on boots. I leaned forward, elbows on knees, the warmth from the stones seeping into my skin. Empathy pulled at me, the kind that comes from knowing isolation's bite out here, where help's a long drive away. That sounds like it lingers, I murmured. Not just the cold, the weight of being the one who has to hold it together. She glanced at me then, surprise flickering in her gaze, like I'd handed her a tool she didn't expect. The professional guard cracked a fraction, her shoulders easing, the tension in her neck softening. Yeah. On shift, you're all action. Check vitals, call it in, keep moving. But after, you need something real. Not protocols, just someone to sit with the mess. Her voice dropped, rawer now, the need slipping through like wind under a door. The stove needed tending. The chill was creeping back, nipping at the edges of the room. I stood, grabbing the iron poker and a split log from the stack by the wall, rough bark under my fingers, the scent of dry pine sharp. Here, I said, nodding her over. She rose, blanket slipping to the chair, and joined me at the hearth. Our hands worked together, close in the low light. Me sliding the log in, her feeding kindling from the basket, flames licking up, greedy. Her fingers brushed mine as she passed a twig, deliberate, slow, the contact warm against the wood's cool. I felt it then, the pull, subtle as a current under still water. Her eyes met mine over the growing fire, holding longer than needed, a glance that said more than words, flirtation veiled, testing the air. But she pulled back, straightening, denial flashing quick. "It's just the storm," she said, almost to herself, turning to the flames. "Makes everything feel closer." I nodded, but inside the conflict churned. Her straight lines drawn so clear in town talk, exes like Tom anchoring her to that path. Yet here, in the fire's honesty, the pull grew, tugging at assumptions I'd carried. Was it the exhaustion talking, or something she'd buried deep, like roots under frozen soil? Her need for comfort, non-professional, real. It mirrored my own ache for connection, the Sapphic quiet I'd chased to this ridge. We settled back, the renewed heat pushing shadows to the corners. She racked the blanket around her shoulders again, but leaned closer this time, our arms nearly touching on the shared chair arm. The conversation eased into lighter beats. Her dry quip about hospital coffee tasting like ditch water, my story of a coyote howling all night like a bad neighbor. Laughter came easier, loosening the knots. But her eyes kept returning to mine, guarded, yet hungry for the warmth we built. Exhaustion hit her then, heavy as a felled tree. Yawn breaking mid-sentence, her head dipping toward her chest. The storm outside droned on, night full dark. "You should rest," I said, standing. "I've got the couch by the fire, or the spare room if you want space." She hesitated, gaze flicking to the darkened hall, then back to me. The cabin felt smaller, the cold waiting beyond the glow. She chose the spare room, the one with the narrow bed tucked under the slanted ceiling, door ajar just enough for the fire's glow to seep in. I heard her settle, the creak of springs, the rustle of sheets pulled tight against the chill. The couch claimed me, too close to the hearth for real sleep, the ember's faint pulse matching my uneven breaths. Outside, the storm's roar filled the cracks, wind whipping snow against the walls like it wanted in. Silence amplified in the spaces between gusts, the kind that presses on your chest, stirring thoughts you'd bury under daylight chores. I lay there, staring at the shadowed beams, the blanket heavy over me. Her presence lingered, not just in the room next door, but in the air. Scent of her damp shirt still faint, mixed with pine smoke. I'd assumed her straight edges from the start. The exes she mentioned easy, like Tom with his city ways. The way she carried herself in town, all clipped efficiency, and no hints of the bends I knew in myself. But tonight cracked that. Her words about the instructor pulling at threads I'd ignored. My own Sapphic pulls had driven me here, to this ridge, away from city nights that promised connection, but delivered hollow. Women who'd vanish after dawn, or worse, stay and build walls higher than these pines. The quiet out here mended some, but nights like this, it echoed the ache. A floorboard sighed in her room, then her voice cut the dark, soft, testing. "You awake?" I shifted, the couch groaning under me. "Yeah, storm's got me wired." She paused, the silence stretching, broken only by the wind's low moan. "Me too. Mind if I come sit?" Can't shake the call from my head. Her words carried weight, the professional armor slipping in the night. I sat up, pulling the blanket around my shoulders. "Doors open." She appeared in the frame, silhouette against the faint light, wrapped in one of my old flannels she'd found, too big on her frame, hanging loose. She eased onto the couch's edge, knees drawn up, the flannel bunching at her elbows. Close now, her warmth cut the room's edge, like sun breaking ridge clouds. "That woman, tonight," she started, voice low, eyes on her hands twisting in her lap. "Alone like that, slipping in the dark. Reminds me of stuff I keep locked down." I waited, the fire's last embers popping soft. She exhaled, rubbing her arms. "Small town like this, you play straight. Exes, dates at the diner, it's easy, safe. But back before paramedic school, there was this girl, roommate in the dorms. We crossed lines. Kisses in the stairwell, hands under covers when the halls went quiet. Bisexual, they called it then, but I shoved it deep. Folks here don't get that gray. Professional life? Even less room for it. Her admission hung there, raw as exposed root after a thaw. I felt it mirror my own, the hidden desires I'd carried like extra weight on a long hike, Sapphic yearnings suppressed under layers of solitude. I get that, I said, voice steady. Out here, I thought the quiet would sort it, but it just amplifies what's buried. Women in the city, connections that fizzled fast, the ache for something real, without the labels sticking like burrs. She nodded, gaze lifting to mine, the dim light catching the tension in her jaw. The professional walls she'd built, steady hands on stretchers, calm under sirens, crumbled a bit here, revealing the personal ache beneath, the need for touch that protocols couldn't touch. The storm roared louder, rattling the panes, pulling us closer on the couch. Her shoulder brushed mine, accidental at first, then staying. It's heavy, carrying that alone, she murmured, echoing my earlier words. I reached out, slow, my hand covering hers on the cushion. Gentle, testing boundaries like feeling for solid ground in fog. She didn't pull away. Instead, her fingers curled slight, the touch reassurance in the cold. Warmth spread from there, soft as embers reigniting. No rush, just the quiet press of need against guard. We sat like that, words fading into the wind's drone, her head dipping toward my shoulder, exhaustion winning slow. Morning light filtered gray through the frost-laced windows. But the storm lingered, snow still falling thick, trapping us in the hush. Morning dragged the world into focus, gray light slicing through the frost on the panes. The storm had eased to flurries, but snow blanketed everything, ridge, pines, the path out front buried deep. Lena stirred on the couch where we'd ended up dozing, her head still near my shoulder, the flannel twisted around her. I slipped away quiet, boots on, kettle clanging soft as I set water for coffee. The cabin held the night's warmth, stove banked low, but the chill nipped at the edges. She woke with a start, eyes clearing fast, that paramedic scan taking in the room. Slept better than expected, she said, voice rough from the dark hours. No mention of the confessions, just a nod as she folded the blanket, movements precise. We moved to the kitchen corner, simple as it was, wood counter scarred from knives, shelves of tins and jars. I pulled oats from the bin, her hands joining mine without asking, measuring water, stirring the pot over the stove's rekindled flame. Her efficiency showed. Quick flicks to test the heat, the way she portioned salt like dosing meds. But it softened here, no rush, her elbow bumping mine as she reached for spoons. Teamwork makes the dream work, she quipped, dry, when our fingers tangled in the drawer. Laughter came easy, the kind that loosens knots after a long freeze. I watched her stir, arms flexing under the flannel sleeves, the professional clip in her gone, replaced by this easy rhythm. Breakfast done, bowls steaming on the table, we ate facing the window, snow drifting lazy now. Her gaze met mine over the rim of her mug, holding a beat longer, unspoken heat simmering under the words. Last night, thanks for listening, she murmured, spoon scraping the bowl. The attraction pulled quiet, like gravity in the hush, her knee brushing mine under the table, not pulling back. I nodded, pulse steady. Any time. Out here it's rare to share the load. The meal stretched, talk light on the ridge's ways, how snow hides tracks, how the quiet reveals what's buried. Plates cleared, we turned to the door. The path needed digging if we wanted out, or supplies later. I grabbed the shovel from the porch lean-to, blade dull from last use, handle worn smooth. She took it first, thrusting into the drift with that steady force, snow flying in arcs. Your turn, she said, passing it over, breath clouding the air. We worked side by side, alternating, the labor warming us, sweat under layers, cheeks flushed from the bite. Her efficiency shone, but playful now. She'd pack a loose snowball, toss it light at my boot, grinning when it thudded harmless. Keeps the blood moving, she said, eyes locking mine, the simmer building in that glance, attraction coiling like smoke from the chimney. The pile grew, path clearing to the truck's hood, buried deep. Our shoulders bumped in the narrow space, breath sinking with the effort. She paused, leaning on the handle, wiping her brow. This cold, it makes you crave real warmth, not just fire or blankets, something that sticks. Her words hung, future uncertainties threading in, the shifts waiting, the town pulling her back to straight lines and X's echoes. I shoveled beside her, sensing the need beneath, genuine, beyond the guard. Yeah, the kind that doesn't fade with the storm. Eye contact again, deeper, her gaze unflinching, the shift clear. From neighbor across the road to confidant in the drift. We finished as the sun broke weak through clouds. Path open, but the road still a white blur. Inside again, hands thawed by the sink, the air between us charged softer. Afternoon brought brief calm, the flurries dying, pulling us back to the table for deeper talk. Afternoon light slanted weak through the panes, the calm outside deceptive as a held breath. We lingered at the table, mugs refilled with the last of the coffee, steam curling like unspoken questions. Weena traced the grain in the wood with her thumb, her gaze drifting to the window where flurries had picked up again, thickening fast. The ridge blurred white, pines bowing under fresh weight. Looks like it's doubling down, she said, voice low, the playfulness from shoveling gone. I nodded, feeling the shift. The storm's return coiling tighter, trapping us deeper in the cabin's hush. Isolation pressed in, not just snow, but the kind that strips away distractions, leaving only the pull between us. She stood restless, crossing to the window, arms folding over her chest. I joined her, the floor cool underfoot, our shoulders inches apart. Outside, wind whipped flakes into a frenzy, visibility dropping to nothing, the world folding shut. Her breath fogged the glass, a small cloud she wiped away with her sleeve. Us talking like this. It's not what I expected when I knocked. Her words came hesitant, the professional steadiness cracking wider. I watched her profile, the line of her jaw taut, like fence wire pulled tight against a gale. The intimacy heightened, the cabin shrinking around us, her warmth a steady draw in the gathering chill. She turned, eyes meeting mine direct, unflinching now. Labels scare me. Back there, with the X's, Tom, the others, it was simple. Straight path, no questions from folks at the station or the diner. But that girl in the dorms, it wasn't just a phase. Bisexual fits, but saying it out loud? In a town like this, it clashes hard. Past pulls one way, this feels another. What if it costs the job? The ease? Her voice dropped, raw with the fear, hands unclenching at her sides. The guard she'd worn, steady on calls, calm under lights, shattered here, revealing the clash inside, professional life boxing in the personal need for truth. I leaned against the sill, close enough her arm brushed mine, the contact grounding like roots in ridge soil. No need for labels tonight, I said, voice even, offering the quiet I'd found in my own solitude. Whatever name it takes, it's yours to carry slow. I've chased connections that demanded boxes too tight, women who fit the script until they didn't. Acceptance doesn't rush. It just sits with you. She exhaled, tension easing from her shoulders, a small nod acknowledging the space I gave. No pressure, just the storm's roar underscoring her words, the isolation weaving us closer without force. We stayed by the window, watching the snowfall, relentless, flakes piling like unspoken layers. Her hand found mine then, fingers lacing loose, the touch mutual, vulnerable. Her palm rough from shifts, mine calloused from wood and earth. Emotional weight settled soft, shared without demand. Her fear voiced, my acceptance a steady hold. The payoff in that simple press, hearts thudding in sync against the wind. No rush, just the raw truth of needs meeting. Her professional shell yielding to personal ache, my Sapphic quiet finding echo. Evening fell early, shadows lengthening across the floor, the storm's howl unbroken. Decisions loomed about staying through the night, the path out buried deeper, pulling us toward whatever came next. Evening deepened into night, the storm's fury waning to scattered gusts, snow falling softer now, like it knew when to yield. We moved from the window to the table, lanterns casting steady pools of light, the air between us still humming from the confessions. Lena poured the last of the water into mugs, her movements unhurried, the flannel sleeves rolled to her elbows, revealing forearms marked faint from old scratches. The cabin felt lived in, our shared space marked by empty bowls and scattered kindling. The fire banked low for the hours ahead. "Road might clear by morning," she said, sliding a mug my way, steam rising thin. Her voice held that practical edge again, the paramedic scanning ahead, shifts waiting, the station's radio crackle pulling her back. I nodded, tracing the mug's warmth, the talk turning to logistics. Her truck down the road, my chains for the tires if needed, the plows that rarely reached the ridge till noon. Normal lives loomed, the storm's interlude fading like mist under sun. But her knee stayed close under the table, a quiet anchor against the return to routines. Her straight-laced shifts, my solitary days chopping wood and mending fences. We talked promises then. Simple ones, that felt solid as ridge rock. "Check in after," she murmured, eyes meeting mine over the rim. "Coffee at the diner, or here if another blizzard hits. No big declarations, just seeing where it goes." Her words laid groundwork. Friendship first. The kind built slow like stacking cordwood, one log at a time. No rush to blaze. I felt it echo my hope, the connection stretching beyond this night. Her bisexual truths finding space without the town's narrow gaze forcing it shut. "Yeah," I replied, hand brushing hers on the table, deliberate now. The ridge gets lonely, but not with someone to share the view. Her touch lingered there, fingers pressing light, a hint of slow burn heat coiling under the calm. Possibilities unspoken, like seeds under winter soil, waiting for thaw. No instant romance, boundaries clear in the way she pulled back, gentle, respecting the time needed to unpack guards and aches. Her professional need for control met my Sapphic patience, the contrast weaving something real, unforced. We sat with that, the wind dying outside, stars pricking through thinning clouds visible in the window's reflection. Morning broke clearer, sun glinting off the drifts, the path out viable but slick. We gathered her things, jacket dried stiff by the stove, boots laced tight. Final moment stretched at the door, her hand on the knob, turning back for one last look. The air held our warmth, the cabin quieter without her steps echoing yet. The door clicked shut behind her, the storm's echo fading, but the warmth she'd brought clung like sun on chilled stone. If you felt that quiet pull in unexpected places, share your story below. Subscribe for more tales of connection cutting through the cold.